Welcome into the Cards Hub post-game show. I'm Sara Dayley alongside Brenden Schaeffer. Once again, the Cards Hub post-game show sponsored by Hot Shots. St. Louis is home for all games all the time since 1990. Find yours at hotshots.net or hotshotsnet.com, and also sponsored by DraftKings. I didn't really know what to say, Brenden, when we first got on, because I was like, the monkey with the cymbals, like, yay, we pulled it off. The second win on the road. Like, the Cardinals finally did it. They had the lead, tied, fell behind, and came out on top, putting a lot of extra runs there in the end. But it was really good to see. I literally clapped by myself in the room watching the game. Like, I was happy.
And you said we have to, how do we commemorate? We're talking about a win on the road instead of a loss has been the trend recently. I asked if you had a confetti cannon or something behind you. I don't think we have that for right now, but we'll at least take some happy comments mentioning already. Last night said maybe they have to score 10 to be safe in this game. Well, they scored 10 tonight. It was the case, as we had talked last night, to say the offense had to take the onus and put it on themselves to be able to make sure they could get this one done today. And Pallante was not quite as strong, so it became even more necessary to get that type of performance from the bats. And they did, with the big kind of just the rain starts pouring down. Nolan Gorman gets the big swing that it just really felt like broke this game open, Sara. So feel good about that for Gorman. And the Cardinals went from there, putting up a bunch of runs. Finally, that crooked number we've been talking about. They had two of them, and one in the eighth, one in the ninth, to be able to put this thing away.
So Dad just had knee replacement surgery, and he's at home, and I was calling him, kind of bouncing some thoughts off him. And I said, well, a couple of runs were on errors for the, when things got started. And I was like, doesn't look so good. And that's when things were knotted up. And he's like, Sara, it ain't over till it's over. And of course, being a reliever and coming out of the pen, at first a mid reliever and then going to a closer. But you take a look at what happened there at the Cardinals going deep with their starter, but then you had the Braves going to their pen early. And so they used quite a few innings tonight. That's what you want. You prefer it in the first game of the series, but tomorrow that looks good for them, given that they had quite a few pitchers they put in. I think it was 6 pitchers they used, and the Birds scored 4 runs on 6 of those pitchers.
Yeah, it was supposed to be this way. I was honestly surprised that Scott blew it through as many innings as he did, because once we found out Spencer Strider was the probable starter who goes on the IL earlier this week, we said, okay, this is the spot where you might be able to win an ugly one and find a way to put some runs on the board and tire the bullpen for Atlanta out for tomorrow when they've got a guy with a 7 ERA that's scheduled to start for them. The Cardinals are going to throw Michaelis. I thought maybe they'd try to save Steven Matz for tomorrow to kind of get behind Miles, where we know that he hasn't been able to go super deep into a lot of these starts. But they were selling out to make sure they could win this game tonight, Sara. And so Matz comes in. Cardinals use a bunch of different relievers behind Pallante. But the fact that the Braves had to really load up and use a lot of their guys, some of them for multiple innings, hopefully can bode well for tomorrow, which could be another game that the Cardinals need to do a lot of scoring to be able to win it. We'll see what Miles is able to do. A lot of people in the comments, though, Sara, focusing in on the Contreras at bat. I believe the one that he drew a walk to set up the Gorman big swing. I've not ever seen a better bat flip on a walk than Wilson Contreras gave in that moment. And so we're getting some love for that AB in the comments, and rightfully so. As look, that's what it takes. These margins, yeah, sure, the Cardinals win the game 10-4. It's a 6-run win, but you see how slim the margins are. They don't win the game like that without Wilson Contreras' contributions there. And he had a great day all around. A couple of hits and the big walk late. You're starting to really see him come into his own, which is something else this Cardinal offense certainly needs.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, you want to see personality, you want to see contributions, and a lot of the guys you look over, in the dugout, and they're all getting excited and fired up. And that's part of this team, is that they've never really given up, even when they're trailing. They've always battled back. They just couldn't quite get the job done. So it's fun to see that. At the same time, I thought the exact same thing that you just said. I'm like, you just drew a walk. Great at bat. Yes. But as a bat flip, I mean, he's not Tom Holland.
I loved it.
Like, you're not going to I was kind of like, oh, okay. Like, I'm trying to teach my kids to act like you've been there before too.
No.
So this was not a great example of that restitution.
You gotta let it rip in that situation when you're just trying to keep things loose. You lose 5 games in a row. It can be, especially when all those games are on the road, it can be a little bit of a weight, I think, on their shoulders. And Contreras, I think, recognized how battling back and getting on base there was important for that spot in the game. You get the bases loaded, and you bring in Gorman to be able to provide the big swing. So I loved it. I saw that bat flip, and I was actually getting ready to send a tweet about it, and then I had to look on my app watching this game, and I said, "No, wait a minute. I think I rewinded a little bit." And so I had to fast forward and realize the Gorman at bat was right about at its apex. So didn't get a chance to throw anything on Twitter about the bat flip, but I'm glad we can talk about it here. I did enjoy it. Yeah, he's been there before, but it's been a little bit. I mean, it's been a long time coming this year for Contreras to really get going offensively. So he can be the heart and soul and vibes of a Cardinals team this summer if he can get things going at the plate. So it's really good to see him picking it up. And I'll maintain a prediction. I can't remember if I mentioned it last night on our show or a different show, Sarah, but I look at Wilson Contreras' numbers, and I'll predict he'll have that OPS back up to 700 or better before the end of April, in all likelihood. I think he's probably sitting around 600 or so after tonight's game. So I think he's really starting to come around. If you look at his recent performances at the plate, that's obviously, again, something the Cardinals really need, but they're starting to get it from him, which is huge.
Well, we've heard a lot of fans and their frustration with Contreras early on, which rightfully so. I mean, but again, we're still looking at sub 30, games so far. So you have to give them a little bit of a break. He's fallen into his groove and he's doing what everyone's expecting him to do. So picking it up is a good thing. I do think, however, though, on your tweet, you might have to do like a little side-by-side of like the Lawless flip and then like Contreras flip and then kind of, have them play at the same time and give it a little justice.
I still have to probably defer to that one in a bigger situation, talking about Tom Lawless.
It felt like it was that big, though. I mean, like, he drew
for the 2025 team.
I'm not denying his at bat. Like, it was phenomenal. Yeah. But and then he looked at the pitcher, kind of gave him a couple looks on the way down to first, took his time I'm like, okay, bud, you didn't just like win the World Series. But
I understand like kind of the old school. I definitely, the more I find these guys having fun with it, I find myself to be very new school when it comes to that, which, different strokes for different folks. But I thought in that moment, it just made me kind of laugh out loud because I'm like, that's kind of what it felt like. That's what they needed in that spot. I don't know.
Yeah, and the young fun, like, again, it's harmless. It is, but you just kind of think about it like there's still a lot of work to be done. I mean, a young team's going to go through these stretches where they're learning from their mistakes, they're learning from their base running errors, they're learning from a lot of things. And so, yeah, you had a great at bat, but you kind of have to keep the mentality like you're in the big leagues. That's what you are paid to do. Have a good at bat. You're paid to get on base. You're paid to hit. You're paid to do things. And if you're not producing, then there's a problem. And that's where I think a lot of fans sometimes get frustrated because these guys are getting paid, quite a bit of money. And sometimes the production level isn't what they're expected to be at.
Yeah, but the guys on the other side are getting paid too. I mean, that Mets roster, I think the top three in their order was like 120 million, just those three guys this year. And the Cardinals payroll might be a little bit more than that. But I mean, yeah, at this level, everybody's getting paid, but I like still seeing that kind of childlike exuberance. A couple other comments talking about Victor Scott, Nootbaar. I mean, Nootbaar's home run, we kind of forget about it early in the game, given that the Cardinals had then given up the lead thereafter. But Nootbaar with a big swing, it's really important for him to continue to be that table setter, that tone setter for the lineup. 2 for 5 tonight, had a walk as well. So on base 3 times. He's got to be that on base engine up at the top. We talked about the big swing from Gorman. I thought it was great, though, to see as well Victor Scott, 3 for 4, on base 4 times, scores 3 runs. Burleson with a couple of hits that it's got to be. If he's going to bat in the 5-hole, he's got to up the production. You had a lot of those moments, I thought, tonight, Sarah, from a lot of the guys that really we've been talking about needing to see that from for this Cardinals team.
So Victor Scott from Atlanta, welcome back home, buddy. You had a great performance in front of your family and friends. I love that. 2 doubles. Like you said, the walk, RBI, 3 runs scored, phenomenal night. And it's good to see he has been putting in hits when needed and in clutch situations, but it's really good to see him start to be on the consistent train. Like that's something that they've been looking from Victor Scott. And I think that's something that he will continue to produce. I think he has a lot of talent and the Cardinal fans are just seeing really what he can do.
Yeah, and right now he's kind of profiling as that second leadoff guy, right? He's batting 9th most of the time. He'll be the leadoff man when Lars Nootbaar is getting a day off. But I think there's going to come a point in time where if he's consistent enough, he'll continue on that trajectory to be a guy that they're more comfortable seeing in those prominent spots in the lineup. Certainly, again, you can't argue with 3 for 4 and on base 4 total times. A run scoring machine. Those are the things you really like to see for sure.
Nootbaar 2 for 5 with a home run, a walk, 3 RBI. 2 runs scored, also a stolen base, continuing to produce. He last night was not so much on that side, but he's still showing up in a series as a key player and key contributor. And I think that is also one of the blips of sparkle, I guess, if you want to say, in some of these road trips that aren't going so well. Nootbaar is a consistent player, and that's something that we need because, you know, Donovan, you also have Burleson, some guys that maybe aren't playing sometimes as much as we would like to see when they're on fire, because Donovan had that streak at the beginning where he was just lights out. And, you know, everyone's going to cool off. You can't maintain this like epic level of production all year long. That's just not normal. And it's not natural, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting too to see where Brendan Donovan ends up settling in. I think he's still putting together some pretty good numbers. Had recently seen his hitting streak snapped over the weekend against the Mets, but then was in the midst of starting a new one. Now he was injured to where we don't know exactly the extent of what that's going to be for Brendan Donovan. Probably just a couple of days is what they're hoping for. A rib situation that had to be popped back in doesn't sound particularly pleasant to me. Brendan Donovan's a tough guy, so they're going to probably try to keep him off the IL if they can. But I do think it's a little bit worth noting that they did bring Mason Wynn back off the IL today. And when they did that, it was Michael Ciani going down to AAA, not Sajasi, who, you know, was the guy that came up initially when Wynn got injured. So Sajasi earning himself enough opportunity to keep on the roster for now. But maybe part of that is the thinking being like, we'll see about Brendan Donovan. You might want to have that extra infielder in Sajasi for the time being. And look, I just like a lot of folks that I've seen in comments want to see Thomas Sajasi because the numbers are there. And if a lineup is not performing as a whole, you want to see those guys that are as often as you possibly can. And there was no Sajasi in the lineup today. But I thought there was a really interesting spot in this game where it was getting harped on Twitter a little bit in the 6th inning where it's a left-handed reliever, Dylan Lee, and they allow Nolan Gorman to keep that at bat with the bases loaded then instead of pinch hitting. A lot of folks would have said Thomas Sajasi. I was sitting there not surprised at all that Ollie Marmol didn't go to his bench in that spot because we've seen this telegraphed. I mean, it's been kind of this way for a week, 10 days, maybe more, where if there's a spot kind of late in the game, and in the 6th inning really wasn't late, as we ultimately saw, Gorman ended up not coming through in that spot, but he was the hero of the game later on, which kind of goes to show you. But we're not seeing a lot of those overly aggressive decisions to pinch hit for guys to set up those platoon matchups. I think that's an example of, we talk about this being a developmental year. The Cardinals need to know by 2026 on February 1st, what's Nolan Gorman? Is he somebody that you'll have already traded because you're not sure that he's going to hack it? Is he somebody that plays his way into being an everyday guy for you because the power and the consistency shows up like you need it to? Or is he somewhere in the middle where maybe he's a good piece for next year, but it's more of a platoon capacity? But right now, they want to give him those opportunities. And I saw John Denton of MLB.com tweeting it out earlier today that it's basically been said by Ollie Marmol, they're looking to give him spots in the lineup for the next 3-4 days or so as they really start to kind of get a look at him and what that consistency could bring for his game. Tonight, it paid off, obviously. They didn't go for the hyper-aggressive platoon matchup in the 6th, but then the 8th inning happens, folks, and Nolan Gorman comes through. So I think that can be a good reminder. There's going to be decisions that happen, and there's going to be moves that aren't made. But at times, those things can come back around, and we see that they end up working out in the end.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Brenden, because I was listening to Claves a couple of days ago. Actually, I think it was yesterday. And he was talking about players defining their role. And at some point, when are you going to figure out, like, okay, maybe our system and our mythology didn't work? Like, what we wanted isn't coming together. And you can see those little glimmers of hope, but at some point he's right. Like, when do you acknowledge the fact that, like, okay, what we thought was going to be amazing and productive is not really working out. So when do we adjust at that point? But given that it is still early on, I think you have some time to still figure that out. Some players that are definitely going to settle in on their own and make a difference. And I'm not going to like compare and contrast, but pushing daisies, not going to lie, I got a little nervous when Halsey walked a few and I was like, no way, right? And I still hold my breath. I mean, I watch it on TV and then I come here to get set up for the show. And when I turn on the iPad I'm like, how are there still 2 on and 1 out? Like, what just happened? Like, why is this a situation? It was 30 seconds ago. It should be a game said match, right? Like, the game should be over. So there's still those moments where you're just like, They're up by a lot, but I'm not going to wrap it up just yet, even with 1 or 2 outs. I mean, I feel like that's where a lot of fans are.
Yeah, I was looking at that and I said, "All right, Ryan, let's not walk the world now. Like we're all trying to get to a post game show here." But he understood the assignment, and so he was able to make it happen. A lot of folks kind of talking about that debate as it pertains to Nolan Gorman, Thomas Sajacy, Bill wondering why not go Sajacy as the DH with Burleson not doing it. Again, I think Burleson's in that same category as Gorman. First of all, you're talking about lefties in the case of Burleson and Gorman. Sajacy being a righty, it was a righty on the mound today. You didn't know for how many times, and so that's part of it. And Burleson again was 2 for 5, I believe it was. Yeah, 2 for 5, 2 runs scored today. I'll continue to hold Burleson to that standard because they're treating him like he's that middle order bat, and I think he can develop into that. But that's what we have to see. You mentioned, Sara, at a certain point, when do you kind of pivot and make a decision on what guys are? I think that's what 2025 is going to be about. And we know Chaim Bloom is coming in, and so he's going to be able to take a look and take stock of everything he sees from this year and say, all right, this is kind of my vision for Gorman. He's more of a guy that I maybe don't want to see facing lefties too often, but the 2025 Cardinals gave him an opportunity to kind of show what that looks like. And then he comes in later and still has the ability to make a big swing for your team. Burleson, he's another left-handed bat that if you go back to last year, he didn't really perform very well against lefties either. But for right now, they're going to give different guys opportunities. And I think that's going to inform which of these guys are going to be part of the future. And Sajacy is another one in that camp. But let's be real, he's behind the others in terms of that priority pecking order because he's 22 years old. The others are 24, 25, 26, whatever the case might be in a lot of cases. And Sajacy just hasn't had that level of major league experience. He's earned his way onto the roster for the time being. I think he's useful to have. I phrased it as Siani I like having as a luxury because it's so nice to have that kind of outfield defense as a winning team when you can turn to that. But the Cardinals haven't been a winning team lately. They have to focus on getting back to a state where they can afford that luxury of a guy off the bench just for defense or just for base running. I think you need having more bats right now available to Ollie Marmol if and when he should use them. But again, tonight, I understand wanting Sajacy in there. I was kind of, rolling my eyes a little bit at the idea that Sajacy was still on the team today, but they didn't find a way to get him into the lineup. It's just one of those things that I don't envy because, again, when Arenado remained on this team, that was the moment where everybody else was getting bumped down a rung on that ladder when it comes to opportunity and playing time. So it's going to come in fits and starts throughout the season. Ollie Marmol telling reporters today that, Gorman's going to be part of it for the next handful of days. Get used to that. That tells me that, they're in a season within this season where they're saying, we're going to push Gorman and see what we get out of him because that's going to be instructive for what happens next. It's not simple. I don't envy the task of Oliver Marmol having to figure out, we want all these guys to play, but inevitably you've got 9 spots. But that's just going to be the juggling act that I think goes along throughout a season. And finally, tonight you saw enough of the lineup contributing to be able to say, easy win in the 9th inning, even though, as you mentioned, a little bit of a sweat when you walk guys like Hellstead. But he'll be fine, and it'll be about finding those other bullpen guys. I want to make sure I mention another bullpen name. What do you think about this? I'm trying this out. I think I've coined it. I think it's good. Kyle Everydayhe is what I'm going to be calling Kyle Leahy from now on because he pitches damn near every day. And the reason he pitches every day is because he has been reliable for Oliver Marmol. And so he pitched yesterday, did his job in the 7th. Today, the 8th comes around, didn't mess around with trying to, go back-to-back on Maton or JoJo. Nope, it's Everydayhe, and he's going to get the ball and get the job done and get that bridge to Ryan Helsley. So let me know what you think of the comments. Kyle Everydayhe. I don't mean that as a criticism. It's a compliment to how reliable he's been.
Well, that's a good thing. I actually wrote it down, so I'm now going to use that. So I'll take your coin and I'll run with it and be like,
Everydayhe. It just kind of flows. I don't know.
We'll hang on to that, and I mean, food for thought. But the only reason we really saw an appearance tonight, late, was because he hadn't pitched in 5 games. I mean, you're going to see him. He has got to toss the ball around a little bit at the same time. So that's where you were with that. But then again, the breath holding really is. But I don't want to take away the win from the Cardinals because they produced. We're excited. 2nd win on the road. But their offense, the Braves offense has been an issue, and they're dealing with injuries. Like you said, the starters and a couple of other things. They're having to rely on their pins. So you're not seeing a full force Braves team collectively together at this point. So if you're going to capitalize on an injured team or like a weak team at the moment, I get it. I understand. But like, again, you've got to look at when are you going to play a stronger team? When are you going to play people that have more talent, a team that really has their stuff together? Then what the Cardinals are going to look like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, and that's fair. Like, they're missing Acuna. You avoid Spencer Strider today, and he's one of the top arms in baseball. So you kind of lucked out there. I do still look at this Braves lineup, though, and say, like, Austin Riley, Ozuna walked 4 times today. The Cardinals clearly didn't want any piece of him. Olsen homers. Albies is starting to come around. Michael Harris has been really, really down so far this year, but he's better than that. Sean Murphy, like, I would say that the depth of their lineup, even without Acuna, is still one of the deeper ones in the National League. But you're right. They did catch the Cardinals caught the Braves at a pretty optimal time because they're a little bit down on their luck to begin the season as well. They've got that sub 500 record just like the Cardinals. But it is okay to be impressed by today specifically because when you look at that Braves 9-14 record, you think, oh, well, they must stink. No, they stink on the road. The Braves have the same the problem that the Cardinals have, where their road record has been brutal. But at home, actually, Atlanta's done a nice job. So being able to win this one and at least ensure you don't get swept. Now get a little greedy. Now say to really try to fight back and get this thing back to 500 as quickly as possible, you got to find a way to win this series tomorrow. And the pitching matchup, I do think allows for that. I know people that are Miles Mikolas haters will roll their eyes when I say that. But the guy on the other side, Bryce Elder, hasn't been any better. And so I really think the Cardinals have an opportunity. Get him 5 innings out of Mikolas, and then you are going to have to turn to that pen and say, hey, we need it from you again for another 4 innings or so. Or you score 10 like they did tonight, which I think is a possibility given what we talked about with the Braves bullpen being a little bit run down. Plus, the starter tomorrow is just not got great numbers so far for them.
And if you're going to stink early on, that's the time to do it, right? I mean, not at the end of the season or in the middle of the season after the All-Star break. So trying to gain progress here. And as Samuel says, we were able to get, it just went away real quick, but we were able to get Sean Murphy out tonight. Well, I guess if you want to try and take away the bonus of
he did
a victory tonight, you what?
I said he did hit a home run, but you got him out 3 times, so you take that.
Yeah. Put one out of the park, even though it's a solo shot. A solo shot you can recover from, but anything else, it's really hard to recover from. So baseball season is officially underway, and it's time to step up to the plate with DraftKings picks. Think of DraftKings Pick 6 as your fastball right down the middle. It's the easiest way to play for cash and take a shot at the big win. Just select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat. Pick 6 is available in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Missouri, and more.
And make sure to check out that promo code STL Sports for your DraftKings Pick 6 new entry.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
So just to revisit your Kyle Everyday Leahy.
Kyle Everyday, yes. My man.
I'm going to use it. I'm going to run with it. We'll see how long this goes. But
when I said it the first time, I had to kind of think it through because you basically drop the L from Leahy, Kyle Everyday, and it can be a little bit of a brain buster, but I'm saying it a bunch of times so I can get it.
I got to say it a couple of times. I'm going to get used to it. I'm going to use it.
Get it logged in for sure.
Yeah, gonna go with that. But it's good to see him growing in his role, right? So they had to figure out where he was best, and he's starting to figure it out. They're starting to use him where he needs to be used, and he's being successful. And that's really good to see, given the Cardinals pitching, whether it's starting or the bullpen, really had to figure some things out. And seeing him solidify his place is very nice to see.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, like 2 years ago at this time or a little later in the summer in 2023 when he came up, it just felt like he was kind of one of those mop-up guys that you just would throw out there to get innings if you were up 5 or down 5, and he's really elevated and established himself since then. And they were even bringing it up again on the broadcast tonight, Chip and Brad, and I think there's some validity to it that they might look at him as somebody down the line who's got enough of a repertoire to be a starting pitcher. I don't know if that's not something that they're going to look at for this year because you can't, frankly, afford to take him out of the bullpen right now. But coming into spring training 2026, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, that's a long way away from now, but they even stretched him out a little bit early on this past February. And for him to be somebody that's definitely climbing up in the pecking order has been impressive to watch. It really has been.
I agree. It's so nice to talk about a win because I feel like quite often we haven't been discussing that situation. Yeah. We're just tearing apart situations that needed to be addressed. I feel like some of those roles or placements that needed to be addressed have been. They're starting to fill in their role. So what do you see moving forward? How do you see tomorrow going? How do you see the Cardinals progressing in their next series and, continuing with this season?
I think there's still room. People squirm every time I say, hey, this team actually does have some talent on it. It really does. Does it have the same level of, high-paid stars that other teams do? Maybe not, but there's a couple of those guys, and you're starting to see those guys come around. Contreras in particular has been a drumbeat offensively the last 2 seasons. I have news. He's going to be the same way again this year. It's just taken a little bit of time for him to get that off the ground. What they need is the continuation of the starting pitching. That would be one thing, Sara, that we haven't really touched on tonight was Pallante's outing, which it was okay until it just kind of started to build up on him. It's that combination of soft contact is falling in, but you also allow the type of contact that goes over the fence. He gives up 2 home runs tonight, doesn't get through the 5th. Keep an eye on that for sure. They need him to be better than he was tonight, but largely he has been this year. We're going to continue to see, though, what that rotation looks like because that's been the constant. Even as they have lost games recently, the rotation has been giving them chances to win night in and night out. Frankly, tonight from Pallante was the worst start that we've seen in a week from a Cardinal pitcher, and yet this was the game that they ended up winning. So what's that tell you? Bullpen matters, and you got good bullpen efforts tonight from guys like Kyle Leahy, Steven Matz. Oh, man, I mean, he's probably an unsung hero of this game as well, where the way it lined up, you might have thought, okay, Pallante's been going 6, 7 at times this year. Maybe he gets deep into this game and you can go with a short version of the pen so that tomorrow when you're tempted to pull Michaelis the 3rd time through in the bottom of the 5th inning, you can do so freely and Steven Matz can mop up 3 or 4 innings. Well, tonight they needed Steven Matz and it worked out. He was able to, when Ollie Marmol said, hey, if it doesn't work for Matz, it ain't working. We're not winning this game tonight. You just had to cover those middle innings with a guy that could go multiples. And so for Steven Matz to go 2 2/3, lefty, righty, didn't matter. He was facing them, and he was able to get them out for the most part. 1 hit, 1 walk, and a couple of strikeouts. It's going to come down to that combination, Sara, of everything working at once. Can the starting pitching keep up what it's done for the most part? Can they get has to be a better version of the bullpen, but we saw that beginning tonight. And then we saw the same thing from the offense. Get 5 or 6 different guys that have a multi-hit game, guys that can come up in clutch spots. If you do that, maybe they've just been making it harder than it is. The Cardinals can get back to 500. The Cardinals can be a team that's somewhat competitive this year. But again, we also see how slim those margins are. Tonight could have very easily gone the other direction. Everybody wants Gorman to be lifted for Sajacy. Sajacy doesn't come through. And, the Gorman's not there to come through in the later spot that he was able to. Whatever kind of butterfly effect you wanted to see play out, they could have lost this game by those slim margins. Heck, you could say keep the managerial decisions the same. Gorman gets that spot in the 8th, but doesn't come through. And everybody's ripping the manager for not pinch hitting. But Gorman does come through, and he only got a chance to because of the Contreras walk. So suddenly you're going, all right, those slim margins, if they can start gaining a little bit of momentum, having fun with it, and trying to ride the vibe on those things, you might surprise yourself when you find out you're closer to this than you seemed to be when you were in the midst of 5 straight losses. And it's not to say they can't go back into a losing skid again, but I think tonight was a blueprint type of night, Sara. Is moving forward, they're hopefully able to kind of replicate that.
I agree 100%, but there wasn't a point. I mean, Matz did throw some chin music and then kind of got a little dicey at times. And so he did kind of give me some questionable moments. It wasn't like he came in and really just, I don't want to say dominated, because as a mid reliever, you're going to have your pros and cons, like you stated, but there were some questionable moments. But then you have Ray, who also has mentioned, do we feel better with Wynn playing at shortstop?
Yeah, I mean, that always solidifies your defense. The Cardinals basically had Donovan and Sajacy splitting shortstop duties, and neither of them played much shortstop at all in spring. Donovan didn't, and maybe Sajacy did a little bit. So that was not something you were planning to have to.
It worked when you needed it, right?
I mean, not that
you want to be there all the time, but when you needed it, they stepped up and it helped. I mean, like, what else were they going to do at that point?
Yep, because they had to. And so those guys are guys that can answer the bell when called upon. But I do think you feel good about having kind of your more A defense out there when Mason Wynn's back in the lineup. And that's why they that's why they want him to play every single game. And he's going to have to be, willing to be communicative when it comes to managing the back pain and the things that have been plaguing him the last couple of years. But yeah, I think that was definitely another thing that helped to boost the Cardinals tonight.
So tomorrow we have an afternoon matchup. I believe it's 11:15.
It's like 11:15. Yeah, it's really early.
Yeah, it's a little early. And the rain was starting to fall a little bit tonight. So I wonder if I didn't check the weather in Atlanta. We've been dealing with enough rain here that I'm kind of tired of it, to be honest with you. So I don't know what the weather situation is down there, but we started to see some of the raindrops fall tonight. So you've got Miles tomorrow against Elder. Miles 0-2, Elder 0-1. Elder and Miles both above a 7 ERA.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, two head-on-head pitchers that look pretty equal right now, to be honest. I mean, according to stats, and not saying that they're actually that way in performance, but if you look on paper, that's kind of where they're at.
And I'm actually going to give the edge to Miles Mikolas in this pitching matchup because the last couple of times the Cardinals have thrown him out there, he's been able to keep him in the game. Like the most recent start was 4 2/3. He gave up 2 runs. Tomorrow, they'd like to see him get through 5, maybe 6 if he can. If you can get 6 innings, 3 runs out of him, I think you'd take that. Elder, though, the last couple of games has given up a 4 spot, given up a 5 spot, which it's been since dating back to that Boston game on the Sunday Night Baseball attempt that Miles Mikolas really last struggled. So hopefully he's able to continue missing some more bats like he has more recently and give the Cardinals a shot. But again, I look at tomorrow profiling very similarly to today. The bats are going to have to kind of carry you because the bullpen's been used up a little bit in this series. You should have the guys like JoJo and Maton back ready to be able to give you an inning tomorrow. Helsley certainly should be able to give you an inning tomorrow, especially with an off day coming Thursday. A lot of people kind of criticizing, well, Helsley hasn't pitched in however many days. There was one spot to maybe have done it, and it was when they were, the day that Fernandez gave up the walk-off to Lindor. I think that was dating back to Friday. They're never going to throw the closer unless it's the 9th inning, and even then they showed you. That was a time where if you were ever going to do it, tie game on the road in the 9th inning, you would do it there because they had Lindor, Soto, and Alonso coming up. I don't think there's a team in the league that has a better 1, 2, 3 and a more mediocre 4 through 9. Like the Mets are very top heavy in that lineup. If you were ever going to do it and say, oh, we're putting our closer into this spot, Ollie Marmol would have done it. He didn't do it. He's never going to do it. That's what it tells me. And so that was the only spot where you could have maybe said Helsley should have thrown in the last handful of days, which is why he threw today, right? So thank your stars that tomorrow he's going to give you an inning if he needs to, because I think he should be able to go back-to-back after such a lengthy time off. But, yeah, putting up 8 runs would be probably the method for the Cardinals to make sure they get a win tomorrow.
So, once again, the Cardinals tonight, after a victory over the Braves, it was 10-4 in Atlanta. The Cards now 10-14 on the season. The Braves 9-14. It is a series wrap-up tomorrow early, 11:15 first pitch. The Cardinals looking to take this series, believe it or not, and looking for their third, that's weird to say, third road win of the season after they've been on the road for so long.
Yeah, it's been rough, but they didn't ever fall to being the worst road team in baseball. I think the Rockies were still that with a 1-11 record on the road. The Cardinals were 1-10. Now they're 2-10. So climbing up tomorrow would be a great opportunity to get a series win.
All right. So if you want some more Cardinals coverage in the morning, be sure to tune in to Randy and Brooke starting at 10 a.m. right here on Sports Hub STL. I'm Sara Dayley. That's the amazing Brenden Schaeffer. We appreciate you joining us here for the Cards Hub post-game show. We hope you subscribe, like, continue your comments, and we'll check back with you tomorrow after the game. So we'll see you shortly. Have a great night, and thanks for joining us.